Hey everybody, welcome. It's Luke Humphrey here, and today we're going to talk about downhill running form really briefly. Uh, been getting a lot of questions about it, especially around Boston, things like that. But I think this is also pertainable to really any downhill course like St. George or something like that. So we'll talk a little bit about common mistakes and what good form looks like. All right, so why do we care? Just mentioned races like Boston, St. George. You know, fast. Even like a Cal International is pretty fast. You get some nice downhills there, but uh, I feel like a lot of people are not really well equipped to handle those downhills. You'll see that especially at Boston. You'll see the people who maybe either out too hard on the downhills early on and couldn't take advantage later in the race, or you just see the people who couldn't weren't ready for it. Like I could actually say, like the LA Marathon in March, significant downhill, but it was something that if you didn't know it was coming and didn't train for it, it wasn't going to be anything that you could really take advantage of. And you can, instead of making up a lot of time, you end up losing a lot of time. So for the Boston program, we definitely emphasize doing hill repeats, but making sure that there is much emphasis on the downhills, the uphill. So early on, we just and that can be from anything from just jogging back down the hill for the recovery, which you'd probably have to do anyway. We'll do that early on, and then as it goes on later into the segment, we'll actually do we'll split those repeats up. So one repeat is up the hill at a hard effort, and then coming back down the hill, we don't necessarily make it the same amount of effort, but we make it harder. So we'll make it like marathon effort coming back down the hill. But just a way to increase adaptation, get you to kind of get used to that downhill, the eccentric contractions, strengthening those muscles, and then it gives us plenty of opportunity to learn proper form on those hills and what that is actually going to feel like during the marathon. So there's a lot of reasons why we can do that. And then we'll also put that emphasis on doing some of our tempo runs, or making sure you get out and doing long runs on hills and tempo runs on hills where you can get uphill and downhill benefit. And then it also just gives you more chance to work on that form so you become as efficient as possible. So, and I've talked about the last part here in other other videos, like definitely like our Boston Marathon physiology lecture. We talked about that, and research shows that if we work on this, we can improve our efficiency and resiliency with regular downhill running. And that's the name of the game, right? We want our muscles to hold up with the resiliency, and we want to be as efficient as possible. We don't want to have wasted energy. We don't want to be running down hills uncontrolled. We don't want to be too aggressive early on, especially at Boston with the downhills, and then not have anything left where we can take advantage of those after Heartbreak Hill, where we can really make up a lot of time if we've approached it the right way. So that's a big reason just to be mindful of it anyway, because I've seen a lot of people put too much emphasis on the Newton Hills and not have anything left for the nice downhill sections after those, and really be able to take advantage. And if you watch the elite races, that's where that race is decided a lot of times, where either somebody who went out way in front gets caught at, right around Heartbreak, and the miles after that where they can really let it rip. Because you look at Heartbreak is usually one of the slowest miles at Boston. The mile right after that is usually the fastest mile for the winner. So you'll see 4:30, 4:20 on from 21 to 22 pretty commonly in the men's elite field. And heck, even the women aren't too far off of that either. A lot of times they'll be running 4:30, 4:40. So if you're in a good position, you can really let it rip and make up any time you did lose on Heartbreak and in any of the Newton Hills. You can make a lot of that up. All right, so the biggest downhill mistakes that you'll see, people will lean from the shoulders, not from the hips. So they'll kind of be slouched over from the shoulders. Head will be forward, and what happens then is you put your torso above or in front of your center of gravity, and then it really kind of takes away your hip flexors and your glutes to work properly, and then you limit yourself on what you can do. Other times people relax too much, and they try to let gravity do all the work. If you're not engaging your core and your glutes and your hips, then essentially all that force is coming up, and your quads will end up doing a lot of the work. And the same thing goes on with the lack of focus. Is you're going downhill, you kind of go in a free fall mode. You really want to keep that focused. Think about what your butt's doing, what your core's doing, what your hips are doing. Be mindful of that. Mindful of your arm carriage. Am I looking down at my feet? Am I looking straight ahead down the road? All those things. And ultimately, what a lot of these will lead to is overstriding. You just get kind of free falling down a hill, and the first thing you kind of tend to do is overstride. And as we'll talk about in a second, that is not necessarily where you want to be. What we should be focusing on is chest back. If we're leaning forward, we want that to be forward from the hips, not from the shoulders. And ultimately what that'll do is keep our pelvis in a little bit better position. It allows your glutes and your hamstrings and your hip flexors to do some more of the work. It takes some of that pressure off the quads doing all the work. Because think about what hurts after doing a hill workout. It's usually your quads, right? That's what hurts the most. And a lot of times that's what it's from, is improper form. Look ahead of you, not down at your feet. You want to be looking straight ahead, and that's automatically going to pull your head back and your shoulders back a little bit. Mindful of your footfall. You still want to kind of be at a point where you're landing not with your heel, not with your toe. And I got a picture on the next slide to take a look at that. But you really want to be mindful of the footfall. And if you do all those three things, ideally you'll maintain your average cadence, because a lot of times what will happen is people will do they'll either have a really increased cadence from shortening their stride too much, or their cadence will slow down because they're trying to maximize that stride length on a downhill, and it's just not necessarily going to work. So in order to maintain your cadence, you should have a longer stride, but not at the expense of your cadence going way down. And if you can do those first three things, like I said, you should be able to take care of that. But it's a good idea. Most of you are wearing GPS watches. You can track your stride length and your stride rate. If you notice your stride length goes way up and your cadence is going way down, then you're overstriding. If your stride length is shortening up, then you want to lengthen that out a little bit so that you're kind of in that nice balance between pretty average on the cadence. So if you're traditionally on the flat, you're running like 180 to 190 steps per minute, and all of a sudden you see big changes in that'll give you an idea of what you're doing. So if you're taking too long of a stride, and your stride rate is probably going to dip way down, and if it shortens up, if your stride length is shortening up, your steps per minute might go way up, and that's not necessarily good either. So you want to adjust those variables to make sure that your average cadence is okay. And you might be thinking, well, if I'm taking a longer stride, you just said take a longer stride, but the fact is that if you're going downhill, and I'm looking at comparing this downhill, uphill, and on the stride, because on the downhill, you could have a longer stride, but still maintain your cadence just because you're going downhill. So your turnover is going to be quicker because of that gravity effect. So keep that in mind as well. So here's what it looks like. I know that picture on the right's a little bit blurry, but I thought that was a good picture of what good form will actually look like. Big thing is looking straight ahead, shoulders relaxed, pulled back a little bit above your center of gravity in the hips, and torso's upright as well. So any leaning forward is really coming from the waist and below, and that's what's really going to help you. Footfall, what I was talking about too, is like if you find yourself striking your heel more, well, that's just going to be a good indicator that you're overstriding. And what is going to happen is all those forces are going to go straight up your heel, through your Achilles, through your calf, and on up. And that means that's taking a big shock absorption. Hamstrings aren't working right. Quads are probably going to be taking a big shock load from that. So that's where injuries tend to be seen. So the next one there, you see that they're landing more on their toes. That means that they're probably taking too short of a stride. They're going quick feet down the hill. And that's not necessarily good either, because then you're increasing the risk of injury, and that's where you tend to probably see a lot of foot injuries with things like that. Ideally is the third one there, where you're still landing nearly flat-footed. Even though your stride's longer, you're still probably going to be landing close to your center of gravity just because you are going down that hill, and that's ideally what you're looking at. So if you can get those things down, those are pretty good, and you're going to take a lot of that load off of the quads. And you'll probably find yourself feeling a little bit better after after doing a hill workout, and it's ultimately going to help you big time on race day, where you're going to be more efficient on downhills. And that's the name of the game for anything, right? We already know we're fit, but we need to be as efficient as possible and be able to run as fast as possible. So if you can be even more efficient and run a faster pace, that's going to be a big win for you, especially late in the race. You're going to be able to maintain pace. You're going to be able to maintain efficiency. You're going to feel a little bit better being able to. You're going to have a little extra drive in the old giddy up, especially if you're chasing a time down. So keep those things in mind. I think I mean, those are pretty simple things to do. Sometimes, go back and look at your GPS data after a hill workout, or even on a hilly run, and just kind of, you can scroll along there and get your data at certain points in time. So take advantage of that. And that's when I think it is good to go back and look at that data and see where maybe you're doing well, or where you need to improve on. So so with that, the benefits of perfecting, we just talked about saving the quad beat down. That's the biggest thing. Glutes and hip flexors are allowed to do their job. It's going to allow your form to maintain. It's going to allow your stride to be as efficient as possible. You're going to have increased efficiency, which means you're going to be able to run faster using the same amount of oxygen. You're going to be able to maintain some, save a little bit on your fuel stores, things like that. So if you're all willy-nilly down the hills in the first 4 miles, you're at a decreased efficiency. All that's doing is putting a pounding on your legs, and it's making you burn through fat and carbohydrates faster than what you would have if you were more efficient. So so it might not seem like a big deal early on, but it's a huge deal once you get through that 4 miles at Boston, and then you have to take that into the hills. And so once you get through the Newton Hills, if you have nothing left and you were just so inefficient because of poor form and things like that, then you're really not going to have much of a chance after 21, where you can really take advantage of that downhill. So so hopefully that helps you out. I think it's really simple things, but I think the main thing is eyes forward, chest back. That's going to pull your back automatically, put your center of gravity back underneath you, and that's going to allow your legs to do what they're naturally going to do more efficiently, and engage those glutes and those hips a little bit more. And then just take a look at that GPS data if you're really unsure, or if you really find yourself taking if you're feeling really, really bad after hill workouts, take a look at that data on the GPS and see what you're doing. But and honestly, that might be a good thing for you to think about late on when you're feeling tired on hills and stuff. Okay, eyes forward, chest back. That could be your mantra. Eyes forward, chest back. Something simple like that, just to keep your mind occupied, thinking about what you're actually doing, and also promoting good form. So hopefully that helps you. If not, ask your questions away, and we'll see what we can do for you. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.